Talk. Welcome to Beauty Talent Talk. I'm Debbie Johnson, your host. Thanks for joining us today. We have Larissa Jensen, and she is SVP of Beauty at Circana, Beauty Industry Advisor. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Debbie, for inviting me to join you today.
And we have Kirsty, our moderator.
Yes, hello everybody. Welcome to today's show. And as always, if you have any questions that you want to bring to the panel as we go through, pop them in the comments and I will do my best to bring them up.
Fantastic. So our title today is From Data to Talent, What Today's Beauty Trends Mean for Tomorrow's Roles. And in the beauty industry, and Larissa, you know firsthand, data is used to identify opportunities, validate strategies. But I want to have a different conversation about data and how it can be leveraged for a career journey and key career decisions. And, you know, as we go into this topic, which we will in detail, I first want to start off just about your career journey and how did you get into market research and what does it take to be successful in a role like yours?
Yeah, so it's almost like has happened accidentally, like a happy accident in many ways. I don't think I really sought out a career in market research, but having done this now for over 20 years, I can say this has been the bulk of my career. But the way it happened was I went into the beauty industry about a long time ago. So over 25 years ago, I have been in the industry a very long time. I started my career at L'Oreal and Estee Lauder before joining the NPD group, which is now Circana, about 20-ish years ago. And the way that happened was I was a student at the FIT Cosmetics, Fragrance Marketing and Management program. That's a mouthful. As a graduate student in that program, we had many guest speakers, and one of the guest speakers was the president of the NPD Group's beauty division. And so she came and shared data on the market, and I was, fascinated. Obviously, I knew about NPD. I was working at Estee Lauder at the time, but I was also very pregnant with my son. And what appealed to me about the NPD group was its location. It was on Long Island, and I was living on Long Island. And as being a new mom, it was important to me to be near him, right? And so that's kind of how I made the career switch. And, it kind of connects into, like, I didn't really have market research experience before that. I had beauty experience. I had the connections and all of that, right? So that was key and important in terms of helping me be successful in the role, just knowing the industry. But the other piece, and I think this ties into what makes someone successful in a job like mine, it's curiosity. That is the number one thing. You have to be naturally curious. You have to always ask why. You have access to so much data. It's really important to hone into that and be able to shape what the data tells you into something actionable. So I think that's really like a key point. Another key point in terms of as my career progressed within the NPD group is the ability to tell a story with the data. I when people ask what I do, I feel like a big part of what I do is storytelling. People don't remember numbers, they remember stories. And the idea behind that is that you want to influence, right? What brands and retailers are doing next. But then the other piece too, and it all connects, is that having the ability to connect those dots that aren't obvious yet. Right? Because I think the industry, I think we can all agree, moves very, very fast. There's trends, there's consumer behavior, there's all retail dynamics, there's a lot of things that are happening. So it's not just about necessarily having the data, it's about interpreting it. And then reporting it out in a way that's digestible. And obviously that's a big part of what we focus on Circana, not reporting just what happened, but helping the industry to understand what it means and then what to do about it.
Yeah, and how it can be leveraged, right?
Yep.
And I'm curious, so if someone is not familiar, with your day-to-day job, what would be something that would be a nuance in your job that no one would really know unless they were doing it?
So let's see. Okay, so I would say, all right, so like think of an intersection, right? I feel like my day-to-day sits where like you've got data, you've got trends, you have storytelling, and they all kind of connect. And that's really the space that I live in. I spend a lot of time analyzing what's happening in the industry, everything from like product performance, category performance, consumer behavior is a big piece of it, how that all connects. So really kind of all of that, like I had said, connecting the dots and then really translating that. That's the hard part. You know, it's sort of like you're looking at all the numbers, but like, you know, how does that actually translate and what does that mean? Because, you know, a big part of what I do is to help our clients help understand how to position themselves in a competitive market. So that could be, that's one big piece of what I do. And I think that is unique. But the other piece too is being out in the industry is very important. Making those connections in real life. Speaking at events, I do a lot of that. Meeting with clients, sharing our perspectives. You know, ultimately, the goal isn't just about having the data, which obviously Circana has tons of data. It's also to really help to shape how the industry looks going forward based on the opportunities that are there today, which might be different from what was there, you know, a while back. And this is, I think, where Circana plays a really unique role because we have such scale and breadth to what we, in terms of our data, we track $3.3 trillion of consumer spend in the US market. And beauty is one tiny piece of it. But what I love about that bigger, more macro view is that it allows us the ability to share back with the beauty industry how we look in relation to everything else. Because, you know, when you're in the beauty industry, you're kind of looking at, okay, I'm in beauty, I'm in fragrance, or I'm in hair, and you're kind of looking at your market and what you're doing and how your category's doing, maybe adjacent categories. But how are you looking at yourself versus other industries like apparel, technology, toys, video games, as an example? And we track, I want to say, I don't know, like 15 different like macro industries. And beauty, whether you look at mass beauty or prestige beauty, are consistently two of the top 5 fastest performers across all of total retail. And having all this breadth of data allows us the ability to really report that back to the industry. So it gives context to the results that we share back with everybody.
And confidence when, you know, especially in 2025, which was such a roller coaster, confidence of what's moving forward. So on that topic, when we talk about data and how it tells a story, how can we leverage data from a career perspective and look at what growth categories or retailers for professionals that are either actively looking or passively looking?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing, first of all, I would say, and this is going to sound hokey, but do your research. I mean, I'm coming from a research company, but yeah, do your research. But I think the important thing to remember is that data is not going to have all the answers. Right? That's the really important thing. It's not going to predict the future as much as we would love it to, but what it does do is help to reduce some blind spots. Right? So I think that's like the biggest piece. So to that end, as you're doing your research, take a look at where the demand is showing up. So I think we were talking about earlier, you know, Amazon's a big topic, TikTok Shop's a big topic, omni-channel's a big topic. So yeah, those are things that you see kind of popping up a lot. But also from like a category perspective, you know, there's a lot of, if you're, you know, you're doing your desk research, there's a lot of information out there in the market that is available to just anybody in terms of how the categories are performing. You know, this could be, you could be looking at, you know, industry trade magazines to understand where are the patterns, what's doing well. So like, as an example, fragrance has, as a category, has been on fire since the pandemic. It's actually pretty incredible that it just continues to accelerate and just change and morph year after year in terms of what's driving it. Is it luxury? Is it value? Is it mass? Is it dupes? Is it, you know, it's all of those things, right? But then how does that fit into the different companies that you're looking at? I would also say look at, you know, investments, like look at the companies and how they're doing in terms of, you know, that's also public information. You know, look at the performance of the companies. what categories are some of these up and coming companies going into that can help you kind of shape what, again, always look for patterns. And then that's actually the other piece I do want to call out then in terms of the patterns, because one thing that we do when we look at trends, right? It's like, we always say like 1 week or 1 month doesn't make a trend. We have to really kind of follow something for quite some time. K-beauty is all the rage right now, but those of us who've been in the industry a long time know that K-beauty came and went, 10 years ago as well. Yes, it looks different today. There's different dynamics in the market today that might shape it differently. So we don't know where it's going to end up. But the point being, it's like, what's a trend and what's a fad? So you have to look for patterns, because a one-off, like a single data point, is really nothing more than just noise. And you can't keep chasing those things. You'll go crazy.
Well, I think product developers and companies have realized that, you got to know your hero. You got to kind of stay in your lane. You can't chase every trend, because costly and isn't always successful. And
be authentic. Always be authentic.
Exactly. And I think on your note as well, when you think of research, not only is it important to identify if you're going into maybe a new category, is it growing? What are some of the challenges and roadblocks are going to be telling? But for professionals who want to, maybe they're a hair expert and they want to go into fragrance and they don't have any fragrance, doing that research and understanding some of the data is only going to enable you to talk about a category maybe you don't have experience in, but demonstrate the interest by conducting the research. I think there's another method of looking at it that should be done if you want to really demonstrate expertise you don't have. But
I was going to say, do your homework. It really boils down to doing your homework. And the other thing I want to call out, just as I was thinking about it in terms of what I said, you definitely want to look at the areas that are doing well. But one thing that I've observed over the last 20 years in market research is that, even in a depressed market, there's always bright spots.
Absolutely.
So say, for example, one example that stands out to me, because we've been talking about it a lot, is luxury skincare and the softness that we've been seeing in that particular area of the business for quite some time now. Now, yes, it's soft, but at the same time, there's brands that are thriving in that space, right? So this is why it pays to do your homework, because it's not just about how the market's doing, which you can definitely learn with desk research, but also how is a particular brand or company doing, which you also, again, can really get a good feel for that with desk research.
Absolutely. I always call those the category captains. I mean, and, even in the hiring perspective, Larissa, I mean, I've been involved in searches where they're downsizing, 15, 20 people, but we're making a key hire. So hiring always happens. Budgets get moved into a different side of the business where they see a bigger investment at the end of the day. But there's always a bright spot. I think that's a really good statement to make and a good perspective right now.
Yeah.
So we've also you touched upon this a little bit, but I do want to dive deeper. Financial health. So as we looked at what's transpired in the last few years, and I've seen this with candidates that have taken opportunity on their own, and 6 months later, they've come back to me and it was a huge mistake. They were, not given all the details, and, the compensation was so grand that, got them really excited about a bigger and better opportunity, but unfortunately investment fell through, or, something transpired where all of a sudden they can't afford to keep them. So doing your research with public information, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that specific topic.
Sure. It's so funny. I work with a lot of I mentor a lot of young, students, college graduates that are looking to get into the market, or maybe kind of moving from their first job to their next. For me, I have always seen it a little bit of a red flag if the pay is too good. I'm like, just do a little more homework on that just to confirm, because maybe it's great. But to me personally, when it's like, wow, that's a crazy high salary, to me, that always feels like a little bit of a red flag. But to that end, again, it goes back to, doing your homework. So what are the things that you could be looking at, right? So I alluded to this before, earnings calls, investor presentations, you can find them in all the big companies.
Yep.
We'll have them, posted. The publicly traded companies are going to have them posted on their website. You also have resources like Seeking Alpha, Yahoo Finance. You can sign in and kind of follow specific companies that you're interested in to see how they're doing and how, and the health of that company. Those earnings calls also help give you that view into their forward-looking strategy too, right? So that can also help, if you have an interview to kind of have that information. I think that makes you just look smarter.
Yeah.
Also, business, beauty, trade publications. I mean, you're going to see financial performance. You're going to hear about brand momentum. You're going to hear all these things. So private equity, you'll hear all those things. So I would definitely follow that. Maybe subscribe. Some of them I know have high subscription rates, but sometimes they're worth it. I would think that, if you're actively looking for a job, it may be worth the investment. Okay. I would say also joining associations. I just came from a CEW event today. It is, it is wonderful opportunity to network. They have lots of events that you can go and meet people, especially if you're new to the industry, you want to make connections, learn a little bit more. You can meet your peers, you can meet leaders. It's really and I would say highly recommend joining an industry association as well, especially one like CW that actually has a lot of events that you can attend and a lot of free events, actually, believe it or not, that you can attend as a member. And then, there's the traditional, and I think we talked about these, Debbie, like Glassdoor, right? Let's talk about Glassdoor for a second. I think that, talking a little bit before how we were talking about like, don't look for the outlier, look for the trends and the themes. Yes. I think that that's what you're looking for on Glassdoor, because there will always be an outlier. Like if a company overall has good reviews, you're always going to find someone that's not happy. Yeah. But what I like about Glassdoor, one, believe it. Because these are, there's no, for the most part, again, don't look at the outliers, but for the most part, you're going to get a pretty accurate read about a company. But what I also like about it is that you're able to break it out and look at, for example, you can look at the quality of the leadership. They actually rate the CEO. The CEO gets scored on Glassdoor. You could look at comps and benefits. You can look up things like career growth, what people are saying about career growth on there. But then also I would say, you can also get a feel for like, okay, what's the stability of the organization? Is there a lot of comments around layoffs or burnout? And how recent are they? Because maybe it was, you have to, again, be very smart about how you're doing your homework. But the other piece, and I know we talked about this, Debbie, was the ability to filter. Yes. So you could filter like, okay, I know I want to be a manager, or that's where I'm looking to be as a manager. You can go into the company and filter on what are the reviews from managers, right? Like how do managers find, you can also filter by gender. So that you can filter by ethnicity, sexual orientation, disability, even all of that's on Glassdoor. So these are it's a great resource for anyone looking for a job.
I mean, it's a gold mine of
it is.
And I think the information is helpful. I mean, I always say that the information generally shows trends when you see certain comments on Glassdoor, but it can open up the dialogue in the interview process when appropriate, of course, to dig in deeper. And I think I've said this throughout my career, there's a home for everybody.
Yep, exactly.
Everyone's home changes through different journeys and stages of their career as well. So I think the professional always has to evaluate, there are the startups, you're running a marathon. But that's not for everybody once you have kids and et cetera. So then you have to evaluate other areas throughout your career, depending on what's most important for them. But Glassdoor, I think, is one of the most underrated tools out there to do your due diligence. And I do think that the information shouldn't be, no, I'm not going to take the interview. It is to allow you to go in and be more informed and ask more targeted questions to evaluate. At the end of the day, Larissa, I'm sure you agree with this, the networking in the beauty industry and the relationships you develop are so key. So taking the interview, taking the call, you never know what that can lead in the future.
Absolutely. I was going to say, never say no to an interview. I mean, worst case, it's just practice, right? But I think you're right. You're going in with eyes wide open, and you can definitely be more targeted and be strategic about the questions that you go back to the hiring manager with.
Yeah, absolutely. And for 2026, I mean, just from a recruiting perspective, I've definitely been seeing a lot more momentum, and there's certain categories we're also seeing continuous growth. Is there anything, Larissa, from your lens that you would say to folks that are looking out in the job market right now that could be beneficial for them to look in certain areas, or just other highlights?
So, I mean, I think like what we were talking about before, just kind of focusing on, where, I mean, yes, focus initially maybe on where there's areas of growth in the market. But like I said, and like you were just saying just now, like, just because there might be a certain rating on Glassdoor, or maybe because that particular brand or company is in a space that is not maybe doing so well in the market because of, how all the homework that you've done.
Yes.
I think it's also about like connecting that and just like you said, there's a home for everybody. So like the brand that may be in a space that is generally not doing well, that brand might be doing well.
Sure.
So, it's about really kind of being informed more than anything.
Absolutely.
And just, I think that would be my answer on that.
Larissa, you bring up an interesting point. I just
Yeah.
had this conversation with another executive on the professional salon side, because I do feel the professional salon side has been kind of going through a reset. There's just a lot of changes that are evolving. And I think at the end of the day, when you're an executive and you do identify challenges within that category or that brand, or maybe there's, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for you to go in and solve a problem. And when you go in and you're like, yeah, it's right, it's not doing well, versus coming in with, these are the areas and this is what I can do to leverage and solve your problem and help grow. That's going to be the difference between you getting the job and not. And I think that's just framing it, leveraging what you know, and getting.
I love that,
research.
Debbie. That's so good.
I think it's just a missed opportunity for some professionals. You can't jump on the bandwagon. You just have to have a different perspective.
Yep. And also, it, like you were talking about before, like different brands, you might be taking a risk, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I think it's okay to take a risk. And I think it's also okay to just, everyone's career path, which I think is really important to understand.
Sure.
Like the road to success is not a straight road up, right? Absolutely. I mean, we all know that. Like the further you go up in your career, the more you realize it's very jagged, and it takes you here, it takes you there. Like for me personally, I had to take 2 steps back. Sometimes I was one time I was working for an eyewear company. This was pre-beauty. And they eliminated their entire marketing department in one shot. So I lost my job. But it happens. I've been in a role where I was terrible at what I did. You know what I mean? And I always call that like my fish in a tree moment. It's not that you're bad at doing work. It's just that you were in the wrong environment.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And so recognizing those things and then taking the lessons from it.
Absolutely.
Is what helps you move forward.
Yes.
Right.
And it's that kind of wisdom when you can go into an interview, because a common question is, what is a failure and what is a lesson? There has to be the lesson, because there always is. But if you're not, have the awareness or the emotional intelligence, you'll walk away and then repeat it, which is problematic.
So. Yeah, 100%. Exactly. Like, fool me once, right? But not, you don't want to fool me twice. But failure to me is it's such an interesting concept, because I don't see failure as a failure. I think failure is a lesson, like you said. Yeah. And if you embrace that, which I know I'm not supposed to talk about my key takeaway, but it's a great segue, isn't it?
We can talk about your top tip. Let's go into that.
Okay. Because that literally actually is my top tip. My top tip is the growth mindset. It's really about empowering yourself with knowledge, staying curious. And that is really what the growth mindset is about, right? Because I think at the end of the day, that's what's going to boost your long-term success.
Absolutely.
Right. It makes you, first of all, it makes you more adaptable to what your environment. If you're able to embrace what's different, or like, I mean, listen, you introduced me before. As SVP, I've been doing this a very long time. I still don't know everything. I don't know anything. I always look, I still think of myself as a student. I'm always learning. I'm always trying to learn something new, keep myself fresh. The minute you think, I know it, I got it, I know what I'm doing, you're done.
Yeah. That's true.
Because you were talking about earlier, right? How everything changes so much.
Yeah.
You have to constantly be curious.
Yes.
And, I put it like quote, always be learning, right? Always be learning. That's how I like to think about it. I'm always looking for new things to learn about.
Absolutely. And I think in the beauty industry specifically, if you are not always learning and leveraging a growth mindset, unfortunately, the job market will surpass you, and you will have a very hard time staying employed. And we're seeing that more and more as, different roles evolve, as AI is becoming a bigger part of technology. Now, you don't have to be a master. No one's a master at AI, but it's understanding how can it complement your skill set? How can it make you more productive? Playing with the tools. We all are very, very busy, but if we could take 30 minutes or 1 hour a week just to dedicate learning something new, I mean, just imagine how few people do that, and how much it can make a big impact.
So funny, to that end, AI can help you learn that. I actually I was literally looking at this. It popped up on one of my feeds. I don't remember, it was TikTok, or I have no idea which one. But it was sort of like top AI tips. And one of them was asking, help me learn this quote skill, whatever you want. Like, you insert the skill, whatever you want it to be. Maybe it's AI. Help me learn more about AI, right? And break it down into, like what I can do, actionable things that I can, hit milestones that I can hit.
That's great.
And, you can use AI to learn about AI and anything else you want.
That's fantastic. I mean, for those that it just makes them feel uncomfortable, that's such an easy method to get their feet wet and start exposing themselves. So final question that I always like to ask are, what are the attributes as a hiring manager that you look for?
So for me personally, and to work in kind of what I do, I mean, I'm definitely looking for curiosity. Number one, that's the number one thing. Analytical skills, but creativity. It's a little bit of the left and right brain, to be honest. You need to be really good with numbers, but you need to be able to understand what the numbers are telling you, like what's the data telling you. And then, so you have to be able to understand numbers, be comfortable with them, and kind of like be the data whisperer. Like, kind of, what is the data saying, right? Like like reading the tea leaves, right? That's kind of what it's like. But then also, very important, storytelling, and the ability to extract those golden nuggets and then visually present them in a way that's impactful. Because, like I said at the very beginning, people do not remember numbers, they remember stories.
Yeah. And same with consumers. If you think about what resonates with them, it's that emotional attachment, and that comes through storytelling. So
exactly.
Well, Larissa, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today. I love this conversation. And thank you, everybody, for joining. And we will see you in June. Have a great day.
I need to get